Caitlyn Clark just signed a deal that ended careers she never even touched.
But even before she makes her pro debut, she has a major Nike deal on the line.
NBC executives are sitting in boardrooms right now, quietly crossing names off contracts. And those names belong to some of the same veterans who spent the last 2 years trying to tear her down. They thought they were untouchable. They weren't. The revenge isn't coming from Caitlyn. It's coming from the people who signed the checks. And they've decided the old guard is dead weight, while veterans are at home arguing over money. Caitlyn is courtside at NBA games, shaking hands with legends, becoming the face they wish they could erase. The power shift happened so fast most fans barely noticed. But the numbers don't lie. And neither do the empty chairs where 10-year pros used to sit. This isn't just about basketball anymore. It's about survival. And the same players who tried to gatekeep are now locked outside their own league. Stick around. We're breaking down how karma turned into a business strategy, the golden goose nobody wanted. When Caitlyn Clark entered the WNBA draft in April 2024, something strange happened. The league got exactly what it needed but didn't seem ready for it. She brought to 0.4 million viewers to her first game with the Indiana Fever. But that's only part of it. The Fever had been one of the worst teams in the league for years. They averaged about 4,000 fans in a 17,000-seat arena. Tickets were cheap because nobody was showing up. Then Caitlyn got drafted and everything flipped overnight. Season ticket sales jumped 300% in a single week.
And games of the upcoming WNBA season, and tickets for the Wings are going fast.
Teams started moving Fever games to bigger arenas because their regular venues couldn't handle the demand. And here's where it gets wild. The veterans saw those numbers too. They saw sold-out crowds. They saw merch flying off shelves. They saw their own social media numbers climbing just because Caitlyn was in the league. But instead of saying thank you, they basically said slow down. Diana Taurasi went on a podcast before the season even started and talked about rookies needing to understand their place. She said the pros were different, that the college game doesn't translate, that hype doesn't equal success. It sounded like advice, but it felt like a warning. Other veterans followed that same tone. In interviews, they barely even said Caitlyn's name, like saying it would make her bigger. Then the games started. Kennedy Carter shoulder-checked Caitlyn during a game so hard it became a national headline. The hit looked intentional, and even people who don't watch basketball saw the clip. Angel Reese celebrated it, clapping on the sideline like something historic had just happened. The message felt obvious. This rookie doesn't belong. The cheap shots kept coming. Hard fouls that barely got called. Screens away from the ball. Trash talk that started to feel personal. Social media posts throwing shade. Podcast interviews where veterans complained about all the attention Caitlyn was getting. Some even suggested the media was biased for covering her more than black players who'd been in the league for years. Fans started asking a simple question. Why be angry at someone who's bringing attention and money to your league? Because the math was harsh. Before Caitlyn, WNBA games averaged around 400,000 viewers on a good night. Interview
new TV viewership numbers. It says the season that began on
regular season games sometimes dipped under 200,000. Weekday afternoon games could barely hit 100. Arenas were half empty. Players were flying commercial because charter flights weren't affordable. Now those same arenas were packed. Games were selling out weeks in advance. Ticket prices tripled. Merchandise sales broke league records. TV networks were actually competing for broadcast rights instead of treating games like filler programming. And still, some veterans complained. They compared engagement numbers. They looked at jersey sales. Every single metric pointed in the same direction. Caitlyn Clark was bringing attention and revenue the league had never seen before. Yet the players who should have been embracing it were pushing back. NBC was watching. Peacock was watching. Team owners were definitely watching. And they were taking notes. They saw who leaned into the moment and who fought it. They saw who helped business and who hurt it. Those notes would matter soon, the business decision that changed everything. February 2025. NBC announced a massive media rights deal covering both the NBA and WNBA. The deal was worth billions. The WNBA portion alone was the biggest in league history. People assumed NBC would spotlight longtime stars, champions, the veterans who built the league. Instead, they pushed Caitlyn into NBA coverage. They put her on screen with Vince Carter and Carmelo Anthony during pregame shows. She was breaking down LeBron James and Steph Curry. Meanwhile, established WNBA champions were nowhere to be found in the promotional material. Think about that. NBC just invested billions into WNBA rights. They could have built programming around league history. They could have centered it around multi-time champions. Interview 6.
Bronze medalists at Paris 2024.
the players who stayed when the league was losing money year after year. Instead, they gave the biggest platform to someone who had played one season. Veterans were furious. Reports said some felt betrayed. They'd been loyal for decades. They played through empty arenas. They promoted the league when few people cared. They flew commercial while NBA players flew private. And now it felt like none of that history mattered. But NBC executives weren't thinking about loyalty. They were thinking about revenue. And the numbers were impossible to ignore. Peacock rolled out WNBA marketing campaigns. So I'm the #1 fan. Who to interview six.
I'm the #1 fan, but I'm the #1 salesperson for the WNBA. I want to make sure that people understand who we are.
Every poster featured Caitlyn. Every commercial centered on her. Other players became background in their own league's ads. This wasn't random. They tested different versions of promotional content with casual sports fans. The results weren't even close when they showed posters with longtime stars. Engagement barely moved. When they showed Caitlyn Clark, interest spiked. Casual fans recognized her from college. They were curious about what she'd do next. NBC tested social media ads too. Posts featuring Caitlyn pulled 5 times more engagement than posts featuring any other WNBA player. Comments, shares, likes, saves, every metric leaned her way. The gap was so wide the marketing team stopped testing other players. Executives reviewed the data. When Caitlyn played, ratings jumped. When she didn't, they dropped. Her jersey sales outpaced every other WNBA player combined.
Basketball writer Dick Weiss posted that more Caitlyn Clark Indiana Fever jerseys were sold in one day.
Fever went from the worst attendance in the league to selling out every home game. Road attendance doubled when she was on the schedule. And the deeper analytics were even more revealing. NBC tracked minute-by-minute ratings. When Caitlyn sat on the bench, viewership dipped. People weren't just watching a team. They were watching her. That created a real problem for the league's traditional structure. The WNBA always leaned on the idea that the league brand mattered more than individual stars. Revenue sharing. Equal marketing focus. Everyone part of the same mission, but the data suggested that model wasn't working anymore. Streaming numbers on Peacock showed the same thing. Games with Caitlyn averaged around 500,000 streams. Games without her averaged about 80,000. That's not a small gap. That's the difference between profit and loss. Between expansion and contraction, NBC made a decision. Legacy didn't drive revenue. Marketability did. In pro sports, power doesn't come from what you did yesterday. It comes from what sells today. And right now, one name was moving the needle. Meanwhile, the WNBA Players Association is in the middle of a labor dispute with team owners. The union wants a 30% revenue share, higher salaries, better travel. On the surface, those demands make sense. Other leagues offer more, but here's the hard truth. The veterans leading that push may not have as much leverage as they think. Owners are looking at 25 straight years of financial losses. From 1997 through 2023, the league finished in the red almost every season. Teams lost millions annually. The NBA kept it alive. Then Caitlyn arrived and suddenly profit looked possible. Sponsorship revenue jumped 40% in one season. Merchandise shattered records. Ratings climbed. The Indiana Fever alone went from losing about $2 million a year to possibly breaking even. Maybe even turning a profit for the first time ever. Interview 1041 to 1048, losing $2 million a year to potentially breaking even or making a profit for the first time in franchise history. Interview 1040.
Officially a member of the Indiana Fever after has decorated a collegiate career.
The owners know exactly where that money came from. It didn't come from the veterans. It came from the rookie they tried to push aside. Now here's where the labor dispute gets interesting. The Players Association is asking for guaranteed money. They want higher base salaries no matter what the revenue looks like. They want charter flights for every team, better hotels, marketing budgets that treat them like NBA stars. The owners are sitting in those meetings, listening and doing quiet math. A 10-year veteran making $200,000 might generate $50,000 in ticket sales and merchandise. Caitlyn Clark generates millions. The numbers don't line up. Why would owners increase pay for players who don't increase revenue? So when the union talks about striking, the owners aren't exactly shaking. They have a backup plan. They could run a season with replacement players if it came to that. Caitlyn is under contract. Paige Bueckers is entering the draft soon. There's a new wave of college stars who would jump at the chance to go pro. The threat of replacement players used to sound hollow. Who would watch a season without established stars? But that was before Caitlyn. Now the owners believe that as long as she's on the floor, people will tune in. They could fill the rest of the roster with lesser-known players, and fans would still show up to see her.
Clark, another long three. She's back.
The veterans believed they held the leverage. They thought the league needed them. But the league doesn't need them the way it once did. It needs Caitlyn. And she's already getting paid by NBC whether a WNBA season happens or not. That changes everything. In most labor disputes, players have power because without them there's no product. But right now, the product isn't the collective league. It's one person. And that one person isn't leading the union fight. She's courtside at Lakers games, appearing on broadcasts, collecting checks regardless of what happens with the season. Some veterans are starting to understand that. Reports say a few players have quietly told union leaders to ease up on the strike talk. They're realizing they're negotiating from weakness, not strength. If owners have to choose between paying higher salaries to veterans or rebuilding around younger, marketable talent, the choice isn't complicated. This is when it started to sink in. In trying to shut Caitlyn out, they may have boxed themselves in. They gave ownership a clean excuse to reset the league's direction. And now they're stuck in negotiations they can't fully control. Nike had a decision to make. They sponsor several veteran players. They also signed Caitlyn to a massive deal. Super Bowl 60 was approaching.
Super Bowl 60, it will mark the culmination of two dramatic turnaround seasons.
Nike had the budget for a Super Bowl commercial. The question was who gets the spotlight? In the end, they chose no one. Nike confirmed they wouldn't run a Super Bowl ad that year. No Caitlyn feature. No veteran feature, nothing. It looked strange at first. Until you consider the tension behind the scenes. If they centered Caitlyn, veteran supporters might push back. If they centered veterans, they'd be promoting players with lower engagement and weaker market pull. So they stepped away entirely. Other brands didn't hesitate. State Farm, Gatorade, and Wilson leaned harder into Caitlyn. Her signature shoe line is about to launch and early pre-orders are already setting records. Meanwhile, some veterans are watching endorsement opportunities shrink. Corporate brands aren't sentimental. They care about return on investment. When Caitlyn posts online, she pulls in millions of interactions. When many veterans post, the numbers are far smaller. That gap matters. Peacock subscriptions climbed 35% during the WNBA season. NBC executives tied that spike directly to Caitlyn's games streaming on the platform. That's revenue backed by data. That's not a debate. The veterans wanted recognition. Corporate America responded with cold calculations. March 2025. Social media is on fire. There's real talk that the season might not happen because of the labor dispute. Fans are choosing sides publicly. Behind closed doors, team owners are meeting. And they're discussing a scenario nobody wants to say out loud. What if they just reset everything? Keep Caitlyn. Bring in young talent. And let the veterans walk. It sounds drastic until you look at the economics. A veteran making $200,000 might generate $50,000 in related revenue. Caitlyn generates millions. The gap isn't small. NBC already made its stance clear. They gave Caitlyn a platform separate from the WNBA itself. She's appearing on NBA broadcasts now. She's building a brand beyond the league that once resisted her rise. If the WNBA season gets canceled...
Last year, there was a lot of chatter around it, but as I said, then when we got into the playoffs, people were hardly talking about it. So I think people love the modern...
Caitlyn still benefits. She's still visible, still earning, still relevant. The veterans don't have that cushion. No season means no games. No games mean no exposure. No exposure means fewer endorsements. And without endorsement income, salaries are all they have. Some veterans are quietly rethinking everything. Conversations are happening behind the scenes. A few players are reconsidering their approach. Maybe they should have embraced the attention instead of resisting it. But timing matters, and that window might have closed. This goes beyond one player or one league. What's happening here could reshape professional sports. For the first time, a league appears to be rebuilding its entire identity around a single athlete. The NBA has stars, but it doesn't revolve around just one person. The WNBA does right now. The schedule highlights her games. Marketing centers on her. Broadcast deals prioritize her appearances. That creates risk. What if she gets hurt? What if she retires early?
Man, that left foot. That looks very painful.
If she decides to play overseas, the league has tied so much of its momentum to one name. If that name disappears, the stability disappears with it, but ownership felt cornered. The alternative was going back to sparse crowds and low ratings. They chose survival. The veterans are learning something tough about pro sports. Championships and longevity don't guarantee influence. What matters is what you generate today. And today, the gap is obvious. Young players entering the league are paying attention. They see that skill matters, but marketability matters too. Being great on the court isn't enough anymore. You have to move the business forward as well. The game is evolving. The veterans tried to slow that shift. It didn't work. Not long ago, Caitlyn Clark was just a college star known for deep three-pointers. Now she's at the center of a massive power shift. NBC didn't act out of emotion. They followed the data. When one player drives more measurable value than an entire group combined, executives respond. The veterans had an opportunity. They could have risen alongside the momentum. Instead, resistance defined the narrative. Now some are at home while she's courtside at NBA games. Ownership isn't reversing course. Networks aren't second-guessing. The business has moved forward. This is what happens when economics collide with ego. The league's direction has changed. It's no longer led by legacy. It's led by impact. And the player at the center of it all is just getting started.